She came to mourn in silence, but what she found at the grave changed everything. A billionaire, haunted by the loss of her only son, returns to the cemetery she's avoided for years, but just a few feet away. A waitress, barely holding herself together, is sobbing beside a crumbling headstone, clutching a child with no coat. And too many questions, two strangers, one graveyard, and a truth buried deeper than the dead. She thought this was just grief. She had no idea. This woman knew something no one else ever told her, and what she's about to reveal will shatter her. She walked with a grace money couldn't buy. Powerful, polished, and alone, the cold wind whispered through the cemetery trees as her heels tapped against the stone path. She didn't notice the chill, not when her heart had been frozen for years. This wasn't her first visit to the grave, but something felt different this time. She clutched a bouquet of white lilies in one hand, and in the other, the same photo she'd kept in her wallet since the day he was born. Her son, her only son, gone far too soon. The world knew her as Eleanor Kingsley, billionaire CEO, philanthropist, a woman who conquered everything except fate. But here, in front of that headstone, she was just a mother broken beyond repair. She knelt beside the grave, ran her fingers across his name carved into the stone. Tears threatened, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not yet, then. She heard it, a soft sob, barely audible, but real. She turned her head slowly, unsure if it was memory or something far more present. Just a few feet away, a young woman knelt before another grave. Tattered coat, old worn shoes, tears streaming down her face. Clutching a small child to her chest, the child couldn't have been more than 5, no coat, no gloves, shivering from the wind that didn't seem to touch Eleanor. Eleanor watched them for a moment, unsure why she couldn't look away. The woman rocked back and forth, whispering something to the grave beneath her. The child looked up, confused, then began to cry too. Eleanor had spent her life solving problems, fixing things, buying answers, but this wasn't something money could touch. Still, something in her chest stirred, and for the first time in years. She stood up and walked towards someone without an appointment. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice softer than she expected. The waitress turned quickly, startled. Her eyes were red, lips trembling. She looked up at Eleanor, then quickly down, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "You didn't," Eleanor replied gently, "but your child, he's freezing." The woman tightened her arms around the little boy, shielding him. "I know," she whispered. I had to come today. It's his father's birthday." The boy sniffled, pressing his face into his mother's shoulder. Eleanor looked at the gravestone behind them. It was worn. Chipped, no flowers, no photo, just a name, barely legible. Eleanor crouched down beside them, something she hadn't done in years. "What's your name?" she asked. The woman hesitated. "Danielle." "And his?" "Jace." Eleanor gave the child a soft smile. "Hi, Jace." He didn't answer. He just stared at her with wide, confused eyes. Danielle wiped her tears with the sleeve of her coat. "I used to come here alone, but ever since Jace started asking about his dad, I couldn't lie to him anymore." Eleanor nodded, something tightening in her chest. Danielle looked at her again. "You don't know me, ma'am, but I know who you are." Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. "You do. You're the woman who owns the tech company, the one on the billboards downtown." She smiled faintly. "I clean tables at the diner across from your headquarters." Eleanor didn't know what to say. Danielle looked down at her son. "I never thought someone like you would ever talk to someone like me." The words landed like a quiet earthquake. Someone like you, someone like me. Eleanor had built her empire from nothing, or so she told herself, but seeing Danielle now, she realized she had long forgotten what nothing actually looked like. The woman who once scraped together coins to buy formula was now staring into the eyes of a mother doing the same. Except this time, she wasn't the one struggling. "How long ago did you lose him?" Eleanor asked, her voice nearly cracking. Danielle exhaled deeply. 3 years ago, hit, and run. They never caught who did it. The pain in her words was raw, unfiltered, real. Eleanor nodded slowly. "My son died 3 years ago too." Danielle looked up, startled. I'm sorry." Elinor looked at the sky, trying to steady her voice. He had just turned 21. A car accident on a snowy road. I told him not to go out that night. Her words faded into the wind. Two women, two graves, two different worlds. Colliding in the one place both wealth and poverty meant nothing. Silence hung between them, heavy and sacred. Danielle broke it softly. I come here when I can't breathe anywhere else. When life just hurts. Elinor swallowed. I haven't felt alive since he died. Danielle looked at her, really looked. For the first time, she didn't see a billionaire. She saw a mother drowning in memories. I know the feeling, Danielle whispered. The little boy fidgeted, looking up at both women. I'm hungry, Mama, he said. Danielle's face flushed. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'll get you something soon. Elinor didn't think. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. There's a place 5 minutes from here. Come with me. Let me buy him lunch. Danielle's eyes widened. No, I couldn't. It's not charity. Elinor said softly. It's company. Danielle hesitated. But Jace looked at her with hopeful eyes, and for once she nodded. Okay. As they stood and walked toward Elinor's car, Danielle turned back toward the grave one last time. She whispered something. Elinor didn't hear it, but she understood. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with answers. Sometimes it begins with strangers. The car ride was quiet at first. Danielle sat in the back with Jace, holding him close, her eyes drifting to the blur of buildings passing by. Elinor kept her hands steady on the wheel, but her mind was spiraling through old photographs and moments she could never get back. The hum of the engine filled the silence, until Jace softly broke it. Do rich people go to heaven too? The question hung in the air like smoke. Danielle gasped gently, Jace, but Elinor smiled, a small, sad curve of her lips. It's a good question, she said. I ask myself that sometimes too. Jace tilted his head. My dad is in heaven, so I want to go too, but we're not rich. Elinor's eyes welled up. She blinked fast, pretending it was dust. You don't need money to get to heaven, she said, just a good heart. Danielle squeezed her son tight. He looked out the window again, content with the answer. They pulled up to a quiet cafe just off the main road. Warm lighting, no crowds. The kind of place Elinor hadn't stepped into in years. But today wasn't about routine. It was about something she didn't yet understand. As they sat, Jace dove into the grilled cheese like it was the best meal he'd ever had. Danielle watched him with quiet relief, then looked up at Elinor. Thank you, I mean it, for noticing us. Elinor shook her head slowly. I don't think I noticed you by accident. Danielle frowned slightly. What do you mean? Elinor took a deep breath. I haven't spoken to anyone about my son in almost 3 years. People around me, they avoid the topic, like grief is a disease. Danielle nodded. I know that silence too well. Elinor leaned back, her eyes distant. My son's name was James. I raised him alone. His father left before he was born. I built my company from a garage. Made my first million by the time he was 5. But I missed his first school play, his first goal in soccer, his first heartbreak. Danielle was listening closely now. Jace chewed quietly, watching Elinor's face. I always told myself I was building a legacy for him, that one day he'd take it over. But her voice cracked. But now all I have is legacy, and no one to hand it to. Danielle placed her hand gently on the table. I'm sorry. Elinor stared at her for a moment. Do you know what they wrote about him after he died? Son of a billionaire passes in tragic accident. That's all he was to them. A footnote in my story. Danielle's face softened. But he was your whole story. Elinor nodded, and I failed him. Danielle shook her head, firm now. No, you didn't. Elinor looked surprised. You loved him. You showed up at his grave. You remembered his favorite flowers. That's not failure. That's grief. Silence settled again, but this time it was shared, a quiet between two mothers who had both loved and lost. Danielle exhaled. Jace asks about his dad a lot now. I tell him little things. He was funny. He loved music. He used to dance in the kitchen like a maniac. She smiled softly. He wanted to open his own auto shop, but life didn't let him get that far. Elinor sipped her coffee. That's the worst part. The plans they never got to finish. Danielle nodded, or the ones we didn't know about. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn piece of paper. Unfolded carefully, handwriting faint but still readable. It's from his journal. I found it a week after the funeral. Elinor leaned in as Danielle began to read. If anything ever happens to me, I want Danielle to know she's stronger than she thinks. And I want Jace to grow up knowing kindness, especially from strangers, because that's how we change the world, one act of kindness at a time. Danielle's eyes brimmed with tears again. I used to think I had no one, no support, no future, but he believed in me even when I didn't. Elinor was silent, but something inside her was shifting, something cracked, something deeper than guilt. It was the realization that grief doesn't just break you, it shapes you. I want to help you, Elinor said quietly. Danielle blinked. Help me? Elinor nodded, not with pity, but with purpose. Danielle looked confused. I don't want to rescue you, Danielle, but I want to invest in you, in whatever dream you put on hold to survive. What was it? Danielle hesitated. I used to want to open my own bakery before everything fell apart. Elinor smiled faintly. You have a name for it. Danielle chuckled through her tears. Sunrise Bakes. Silly, right? No, Elinor said. It's beautiful. Danielle stared at her, unsure if she was dreaming. I can't promise it'll be easy, Elinor added, but I can promise I'll walk beside you while you build it. Danielle wiped her eyes again, overwhelmed. I don't even know what to say. Jace looked up with crumbs on his chin. Does this mean Mommy gets to bake all day? They both laughed through the tears. Elinor looked at him and said gently, It means your mommy is about to show the world what strength really looks like. In that tiny cafe beneath cheap lights and chipped mugs, two lives shifted, not with noise, not with headlines, but with a whisper of hope, and the beginning of something bigger than grief. From that small cafe table, a new chapter quietly began. Elinor didn't announce it with press releases. She didn't call her board or make a show of generosity. She simply handed Danielle a small, worn notebook from her purse. This, she said, was James' idea journal. I couldn't bear to open it until today. Danielle took it carefully, almost like it might break in her hands. He had dreams too. Elinor continued, things he never got to build. Maybe some of them were meant for someone else to carry forward. Danielle opened the first page. Inside were rough sketches, messy handwriting, business names, app ideas, recipes, even slogans, and on one page, a quote written in bold letters, people don't need a handout, they need a hand to believe in them. Tears welled in Danielle's eyes. She nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what she was holding. Let me help you build Sunrise Bakes, Elinor said, but let's make it more than a bakery. Let's make it a place where second chances rise with the bread. Danielle's hands trembled. She had never imagined a life where someone powerful stood behind her, not above her, and Elinor. For the first time in years, she didn't feel hollow. She felt connected, rooted, not in money, not in power, but in purpose. Weeks passed, then months, and with every early morning and sleepless night, the bakery began to take shape. It wasn't easy. There were permits to chase, ovens that broke down, and bank managers who still judged Danielle by her shoes, not her soul. But Elinor never wavered. She showed up at city meetings, sat beside Danielle during every negotiation, and quietly paid every bill without a headline. But she didn't just bring money, she brought belief. And sometimes, belief is the currency that changes everything. Opening day came faster than they expected. A small crowd gathered on a quiet corner street. No red carpet, just the smell of fresh bread, warm cinnamon, and hope. The sign above the door read, Sunrise Bakes, where every day is a new beginning. Danielle stood at the door, apron dusted in flour, hands shaking. Jace held her hand tightly, smiling with pride. Elinor stood beside them, quieter than usual. She wasn't the star of this story. She was the thread in the background. Finally, where she needed to be, reporters came, not because Elinor called them, but but because the city had heard whispers. A billionaire backing a waitress. A bakery built on grief and grace. They wanted the story, and Elinor let Danielle tell it. Inside, the bakery was cozy. Photos lined the walls of Danielle's husband, of James, of Jace's first day of school. There was a corner shelf labeled the gratitude wall, where customers could leave notes, prayers, or names of loved ones they'd lost. It became the soul of the shop. People would come for bread and stay for healing. Veterans, widows, single parents, struggling students, they came for a cinnamon roll and left feeling seen. Elinor visited often, sometimes with fresh ideas, sometimes just to sit quietly by the window with coffee and memory. Danielle always saved her a spot. One evening after closing, Danielle found Elinor sitting alone with her notebook. James' journal, open on the table. You okay? She asked. Elinor nodded slowly. I think. For the first time in years, I am. Danielle sat across from her, wiping flour from her arms. You saved me, you know, she said quietly. Elinor looked up. No. You reminded me what saving someone actually means. Danielle smiled. I still hear his voice sometimes. My husband. When I'm about to give up, I hear him say, just one more try, Danny. Elinor closed the journal and placed it on the table. I hear James too. She whispered. When the world gets too loud, I hear him laugh. She paused, breathing in the scent of the bakery, the kind of place James would have loved. I used to think grief was a closed door. Elinor said, but maybe. It's just a hallway, and sometimes if you keep walking, you find another door. Danielle nodded, and sometimes someone hands you the key. They both smiled, two women from different worlds, bound by pain, healed by purpose. The story spread far beyond the neighborhood. People came from other cities just to seat the bakery built by a billionaire and a broken dream. But what they found was more than good pastries. They found humanity, and in a world hungry for connection, that was priceless. Jace grew up knowing his mother wasn't just a survivor, she was a builder. A creator, a woman who took grief and baked something beautiful from it. And Elinor, she never returned to her boardroom the same. She no longer chased legacy in numbers or headlines. She found it in quiet places, like a child's laughter over a muffin, or a widow finding comfort in cinnamon and kindness. She had lost her son, but through Danielle, through Jace, through Sunrise Bakes, she found a way to love again, not by replacing her grief, but by redeeming it. So the next time someone tells you strangers don't change lives, remember this: sometimes the person you're meant to save is the one you thought had nothing to offer. Sometimes the richest hearts are hidden behind tattered coats, and sometimes the most shattered souls leave behind the most beautiful blueprints. All it takes is one moment, one grave, one question, one act of courage to say, I see you. Years passed, the bakery kept growing, but never lost its soul, and Elinor, she never stopped visiting, not as a billionaire, but as family. She watched Jace grow from a curious little boy into a young man with his father's laugh and his mother's fight. He would help frost cupcakes on weekends, and listen quietly when elderly customers shared memories of their own lost loved ones. He had seen grief, he had lived hunger, but now he lived with purpose. On what would have been James' 30th birthday, Elinor returned to the same grave, but she wasn't alone this time. Danielle stood beside her. And so did Jace. Now tall, now strong, now filled with dreams of his own. They brought lilies and a note. Elinor knelt just like before, only this time there was no sorrow in her hands, only gratitude. She placed the note at the base of the stone. It read, I thought your story ended with loss, but you passed your light to strangers who carried it further than I ever imagined. I'll miss you forever, but now I carry you forward. Danielle rested her hand on Elinor's shoulder. You gave me back my voice, she whispered. Elinor smiled through her tears. No, you gave me back my heart. They stood in silence, three people connected by death, but defined by what they built in the wake of it. Because sometimes the most powerful legacies are not born in boardrooms or headlines, they're born in quiet places, in broken hearts, in unexpected meetings on cold days. You see, grief doesn't end us. It invites us to begin again differently, painfully, truthfully. And that's what Eleanor learned the day she saw a waitress crying with a child at a stranger's grave, that not all pain can be healed, but all pain can be honored. That money builds empires, but empathy builds futures. That one moment of human connection can echo across generations. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest kind of wealth isn't counted in dollars, but in how deeply you've helped someone rise when they had every reason to fall. So the next time you walk past someone who looks lost, or sit in silence with a grief that won't let go, remember Eleanor. Remember Danielle. Remember the grave where everything ended and where everything truly began. Because some stories don't just change us, some stories rewrite us.